Hello, my brothers and sisters, and thank you for listening to the voices of the diaspora. The war in Iraq, straight from the Shah, where the street hustle stays, but I'm preaching the truth in these end-time days. I grew up in the ghetto, but I'm not what you think. I've been around the world and back, and I've stood at the brink. Now I'm talking on the mic for the voices of diaspora's call to break down the shadow that's hanging over us all. Welcome to CHUCH, where the truth is the wine, and we sit in the booth and we take it to the nine. The lie and the line, the IRGC Navy, they made a decree. The strait is controlled and is no longer free. Mohammed Zad spoke it. The world felt the chill, while the White House was claiming the waters were still. But the president lied. See, the safety is gone as the Marines hit the current before the first dawn. A few dozen floating across the miles of blue, where the fifth of the world's oil is supposed to pass through. The fire on the surface. They've got drones, boats, explosives, packed tight with lead. 13 ships have been harmed and 6 crew members dead. 3 more were attacked. Just as morning turned gray, on day 12, the fury that's coming our way. And where is the Navy? Where's the escort, the pride? Not a single commercial ship wanted to take that ride. Operation Epic Fury. The name sounds so grand, but the strait is a graveyard far away from this land. The pulse of the planet. 138 ships used to glide through the narrow corridor, riding the tide. Super tankers and gas carrying cargoes and light, powering the nation through the depths of the night. But now the Gulf's quiet, the engines are cold, while the captains are waiting for the cargo to be sold. The artery is clogged, and the pulse has gone still, as the markets are watching the cost of the bill, the paper and the power. It isn't just warships or drones, boats that kill. It's the stroke of the pen and the lack of the will. Maersk and Hapag, they've pulled out their fleets, while the panic is rising in the world's city streets. Because without insurance, no steel will move. No coverage for wars mean there's nothing to prove. 15 million barrels used to flow every day, but the fate of the strait took that glory away. Take it away, Mike and Mika.
The most advanced military on Earth, armed with multi-billion-dollar aircraft carriers, and it's just completely paralyzed.
Yeah, completely dead in the water.
Right, and not by some rival superpower, but by a few cheap fiberglass boats and literally the stroke of an actuary's pen in an office building like 3,000 miles away.
It's wild. It really is.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are really thrilled you're here with us. Our mission today is to examine this raw, incredibly gripping piece of source material we've received.
Yeah, it's an excerpt from a spoken word style commentary.
Exactly. It's titled The Fate of the Strait, Crisis in the Hormuz Corridor, delivered by a figure known as the Reverend Point Blank.
Fascinating name, by the way.
Right. And our goal today is to unpack exactly how the closure of one incredibly narrow waterway can just instantly and practically invisibly paralyze the entire global economy.
I mean, it is a genuinely fascinating piece of text. What the Reverend Point Blank does here is, well, they blend this street-level visceral poetry with very high-stakes, real-world geopolitical analysis.
Totally.
It forces you to look at global logistics not as, a sterile spreadsheet, but as a deeply vulnerable physical system.
It really does. But before we get into the actual mechanics of what the source describes happening out on the water, we do need to address something right up front.
Yeah, the elephant in the room.
Right. The material we are looking at today contains some highly charged political statements. Specifically, the source claims that President Trump, quote, lied about the safety of the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. And it also prominently features declarations by an Iranian IRGC Navy official.
Yeah, Mohammed Akbarzad. Exactly. We are just here to help you understand the narrative that the Reverend Point Blank is presenting. Nothing more, nothing less.
We're basically just looking at the machinery of the crisis, right? Just as it's laid out by the author.
Period. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the source immediately drops us into this massive, jarring disconnect.
Oh, yeah. The whiplash is real.
It really is. We move from these sweeping political statements straight into the grim physical reality of what is actually happening out on the water. It sets up this terrifying contrast between what leaders are saying on television and what sailors are actually experiencing out in the waves.
The contrast is incredibly stark. According to the text, you have the IRGC official, Mohammed Akbarzad, officially declaring that the Strait of Hormuz is under the complete control of Iran.
Right.
And then, just hours later, you have President Trump stating that the strait is completely safe for passage.
And the source violently disputes that safety claim. I mean, I'm trying to square these two realities because the Reverend point blank points to the physical threats currently bobbing in the water.
Yeah, the actual hardware.
Right. We aren't talking about abstract diplomatic tensions here. We're talking about mines.
Actual explosives.
A few dozen mines, according to the source, just dropped right into the current. And the detail that really caught my eye, the thing that just blew my mind, is where they are dropped.
The geographic bottleneck.
Yes. The source specifies they are spread across just 4 miles of usable water. Like, why only 4 miles? I mean, the ocean is huge, right?
Well, that is the geographic trap of the strait. I mean, when we picture the ocean, we picture this boundless, deep blue water where a ship can just go anywhere it wants.
Right, like an open highway.
Exactly. But commercial shipping lanes don't work like that at all. The massive supertankers moving through Hormuz have an incredibly deep draft.
Which means?
It means the bottom of the ship extends deep, deep underwater. They cannot just sail in the shallows near the coastlines, or they will literally run aground.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they require very specific, deep, predictable channels. So when the source mentions 4 miles of usable water, it highlights how concentrated this vulnerability actually is.
So you don't need to block the whole ocean.
No, not at all. You don't need to mine the whole Gulf to stop global trade. You just need to sprinkle a few dozen explosives into that tiny 4-mile wide deep water driveway.
That is a terrifying bottleneck. And according to the text, it's not just mines sitting passively in the water either.
No, it gets worse.
It gets way worse. The source details the active deployment of explosive drone boats.
Right.
These are fast-moving surface threats packed tight with warheads designed to detonate right on impact.
Yeah, kamikaze boats, essentially.
Exactly. So you have underwater threats you can't see, and you have surface threats speeding right at you. And the human toll, as laid out in the text, is already devastating.
What were the numbers again?
13 ships hit, 6 crew members dead, and 3 more attacked just on day 12 of what the source calls Operation Epic Fury.
Right, Operation Epic Fury. And yet, despite that incredibly grand, intimidating name, the source points out a glaring military reality that completely undermines those political promises of safety.
Which is just staggering to read.
It is. As of day 12 of this crisis, the U.S. Navy have not escorted a single commercial vessel through that corridor. Not one.
It honestly blows my mind. I mean, to put this in perspective for you, it's like your local mayor going on the evening news and telling you that the main highway through town is perfectly safe for your morning commute.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you look out your window and there are literally cars exploding on the asphalt. There are spike strips hidden in the lanes, and there is absolutely zero police presence to be found to escort you through it safely.
Right. The TV tells you one thing, but the reality on the asphalt is lethal.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is the sheer asymmetry of the warfare being described by the Reverend point blank.
What do you mean by asymmetry?
Well, we are talking about a few dozen relatively cheap, low-tech mines and some impact-detonating fiberglass drone boats.
Yeah, stuff that doesn't cost billions.
Exactly. Yet this localized, asymmetric tactic has completely neutralized the perceived safety provided by massive, high-tech, global navies. It totally flips the script on military dominance.
Wow.
I mean, think about it. A multi-billion-dollar radar system on a destroyer is designed to track supersonic fighter jets and incoming missiles, right?
Right.
It's not necessarily designed to track a swarm of cheap, low-profile speedboats hiding in the surface clutter. It doesn't matter how advanced your aircraft carriers are if the commercial ships they are supposed to protect are getting blown up by surface drones.
That makes you question the very definition of control, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What stands out to you when you hear about that stark difference between political promises and the reality on the ground? It's chilling.
Because the IRGC says they have control, the U.S. says the water is safe, but the only thing actually controlling that water right now seems to be total chaos.
Chaos and fear.
Right. Which makes me wonder, and I think anyone reading this would wonder, if we have unescorted, highly vulnerable ships facing explosive drones and hidden mines, why don't these captains just take a detour?
Ah, the detour question.
Yeah. Why are they risking this specific stretch of water? If it's that dangerous, just go around.
Well, that is the crux of the entire global crisis right there. There is no around.
Really? Not at all.
None. The source describes the Strait of Hormuz as the single most important energy artery on Earth. You can't bypass it because the oil fields are on one side and the global markets are on the other.
And this is the only gate.
This is the only gate.
Let's look at the pre-crisis numbers the source provides, because they are genuinely hard to even wrap your head around. According to the text, 138 commercial ships pass through this corridor every single day.
That's a massive amount of traffic.
Massive. We are talking super tankers, liquefied natural gas carriers, just these colossal container ships carrying cargo across continents.
It's a continuous conveyor belt of immense scale. And the text notes that roughly 15 million barrels of crude oil per day moved through the strait before this crisis started.
15 million barrels every single day. Let's break that down, because a number that big sort of loses its meaning.
It just becomes abstract.
Right. So what does this all mean? For you, listening to this deep dive right now, it means this isn't just some abstract geopolitical spat happening on a map far away. This is the sudden freezing of the literal energy that powers your nation.
Yes.
We were talking about the fuel that refines into the gas in your car, the diesel that powers the trucks delivering groceries to your local supermarket, the energy required to heat your home in the winter.
Exactly. It touches everything. And the source emphasizes that this single flow represents nearly 20% of the world's total oil supply.
A fifth of the world.
1/5 of the energy that powers the globe, squeezing through a 4-mile wide usable corridor. When that stops, the downstream effects are instantaneous and they're catastrophic.
And right now, according to the text, the pulse of that planet-wide system has completely stopped. Flatlined. The imagery the Reverend point blank uses is incredibly evocative here. The text says, quote, "The Gulf is quiet. The engines are cold."
That's a haunting line.
Isn't it? Just think about that. Hundreds of massive vessels are just sitting idle across the water. You have captains waiting on the bridge, millions of tons of cargo frozen in place, and global markets practically holding their breath.
It perfectly illustrates the extreme vulnerability of global logistics.
Right.
We tend to think of the global economy as this resilient, modern engine, unbreakable.
Yeah, redundant systems everywhere.
Right. But the massive, continuous daily momentum of that entire system relies entirely on the uninterrupted flow through this one tiny, fragile passage.
Wow.
It exposes the fact that we build these massive interconnected economies, that they are entirely dependent on a 4-mile stretch of water not having explosive devices in it. It's the ultimate single point of failure.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because I understand the bottleneck. I understand the geographic vulnerability. You're saying a few cheap drones and a few dozen mines have neutralized a superpower's navy and stopped 20% of the world's oil.
Based on the text, yes.
But surely the United States military has minesweepers. I mean, they have the technology to clear the water. Why not just sweep those 4 miles of usable channel, set up a heavily armed perimeter, and physically guide the ships through? If the stakes are the global economy, military might should be able to force a physical solution, right?
Well, that is the conventional wisdom. You assume a military blockade requires a military counteroffensive.
Yeah. Bring in the warships, sweep the mines, blow up the drones, and get the oil moving.
Right. But the narrative and the source pivots completely here. This is the big twist. The true reason these ships aren't moving right now isn't actually just about the physical explosives in the water.
It's not.
No. It's about corporate bureaucracy.
Wait, paperwork.
Paperwork. This is where the source dives into the invisible mechanics of global trade. The text explicitly lists major global shipping companies that have completely halted operations in the region.
Okay, like who?
Maersk, CMA, CGM, Hapag-Lloyd, several major Japanese carriers. They've all completely stopped.
Wow.
And the reason given in the text is not that their ships aren't physically capable of making the journey behind a U.S. Navy minesweeper. It's because of maritime insurance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you say insurance, most people think of like their car insurance. You get in fender bender, your rates go up. But maritime insurance for supertanker has to be a totally different beast, right?
Completely different universe. The source specifically notes that insurers withdrew what's called protection and indemnity coverage for vessels entering the strait.
Protection and indemnity, P&I.
Exactly. In the shipping industry, P&I insurance is everything. It's not just covering the physical steel hull of the ship if it gets a hole blown in it. Protection and indemnity covers liability.
Which means what exactly? In the context of a ship carrying 15 million barrels of oil.
It means covering the catastrophic multi-billion-dollar cost if that oil spills into the ocean.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it covers the environmental cleanup, the lost cargo, the liability to the crew, everything. The moment the Strait of Hormuz was effectively classified as a war zone due to these drone and mine attacks, the standard P&I coverage was pulled by the insurers.
Just go on.
Just evaporated.
So it's like trying to drive your car to work. Your car works perfectly, the military has cleared the road of debris, but your auto insurance company just called and said, if you turn the key, your policy is completely void.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how safe the road looks behind a police escort. You literally cannot afford the financial liability to pull out of your driveway.
That is exactly it. And in global shipping, it's even stricter than driving your car.
How so?
Because without P&I insurance, a ship cannot legally operate. Ports will refuse to let an uninsured ship dock.
Oh, because they don't want the risk either.
Right. No port authority wants to risk an uninsured vessel sinking in their harbor and leaving them with $1 billion cleanup bill.
Makes sense.
So without insurance, the steel simply does not move. The ship becomes a massive floating liability.
That is a brutal truth of the industry. It means that it doesn't matter if you have 100 aircraft carriers doing laps in the Gulf, dropping depth charges and sweeping mines 247. You can't shoot a lack of insurance with a cruise missile.
And that is precisely the point the Reverend point blank is making in this text. A multi-billion-dollar military operation is essentially rendered completely powerless by the stroke of an actuary's pen.
That is wild.
If the underwriters sitting in boardrooms in London or New York look at the risk models and say, we will not cover a $100 million supertanker traversing a mine waterway, even with a Navy escort,
Then that's it.
then that tanker drops anchor and goes nowhere. The corporate risk calculation supersedes the military guarantee of safety.
It is so wild to think about. I mean, the source spells it out perfectly. There's a line from the commentary that really hits hard. It isn't just warships or the drone boats that kill, it's the stroke of a pen and a lack of a will.
Yeah, that line sums it up perfectly.
The physical weapons cause the initial scare, sure, but the lack of protection and indemnity coverage is the actual invisible blockade keeping the global economy shut down.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a genuinely shocking reality about who really governs the flow of global trade.
Right, because it's not the politicians.
No. We are taught to think of international waters being kept open by the sheer force of navies and international treaties. We think of admirals and commanders ensuring the freedom of navigation.
Military might.
Right. But really, those sea lanes are kept open by risk management and financial markets. Those entities hold the ultimate veto power over global logistics. Right. They have the power to override military assurances. When the risk of losing a single vessel and its massive cargo becomes mathematically uninsurable, the global shipping industry freezes instantly.
Let me see if I fully understand the mechanics here, based on the text. The U.S. Navy could theoretically sweep every single mine tomorrow morning.
Sure.
They could blow up every drone boat by noon.
Yep.
But until the insurance companies are mathematically convinced the risk is literally zero, that 20% of the world's oil is staying exactly where it is.
You've got it. The paper blockade outlasts the physical one.
That is exactly what the text implies has happened in this scenario. The military might clears the physical path, but until the financial sector clears the legal and liability path, the engines stay cold.
And that raises such an uncomfortable question about the modern world, doesn't it?
It really does. How much of our perceived stability, like the food on our shelves, the gas in our cars, the heating in our homes, is actually just a reliance on incredibly fragile financial agreements holding steady?
It's immense. I mean, the physical capability to move things is secondary to the financial permission to do so.
Permission, yeah.
And when a highly localized, low-tech, asymmetric attack alters that financial permission, the whole system just collapses.
So let's step back and look at what we've unpacked today from the Reverend Point Blank's commentary. We started by looking at the global economy, which we normally think of as this unstoppable, heavily engineered machine.
Right.
But through the lens of this source, we realized it's actually much more like a fragile living organism with a highly vulnerable, 4-mile wide artery.
And that artery, the Strait of Hormuz, was successfully severed, not by a competing superpower, but by an incredibly asymmetric, low-tech threat that exploited the geographic bottleneck.
Right. We saw the immense military might of a global superpower, and 1/5 of the world's daily energy supply were effectively paralyzed.
Yeah.
They weren't stopped dead in their tracks by a massive equivalent opposing armada. They were halted by a few dozen impact detonating drones, a handful of mines, and, most crucially, the swift bureaucratic cancellation of corporate liability policies.
The real aha moment for anyone analyzing this text is recognizing that the physical blockade and the paper blockade are working in tandem to shut down the world. The mines create the risk, but the insurance actuaries actually enforce the blockade.
It's the ultimate asymmetric warfare. You disrupt 4 miles of water, you spook the underwriters in London, and you literally freeze the engines of the planet.
Which leaves us with a lingering thought to consider well beyond the Strait of Hormuz.
I'd love to hear it.
If a single geographic choke point and a handful of canceled maritime insurance policies can freeze 1/5 of the globe's oil overnight, what other invisible bureaucratic vulnerabilities are quietly holding together the rest of our fragile global supply chains right now?
Oh man, a chilling thought to leave on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
As always, my brothers and sisters, thanks for listening to the voices of the All right, my brothers and sisters, thanks for listening to the voices of the diaspora. I'm the Reverend Point Blank. Please stay tuned for our next show, From Chains to Champions. Peace and love.